The man on my table was dead for 42 seconds. The problem was, he didn't stay that way. My name is Dr. Elise Rowen, and I have a rule about miracles. If you can't bill for them, they don't exist. Not in a trauma or at 2:57 a.m. under lights that flicker like bad neon, and vents that push out air that always smells faintly of antiseptic and burnt dust. Clamp, I said, and Miller slapped it into my palm, metal on latex, clean as a metronome. The man was mid-30s, highway collision, chest a shattered map under the drape. The ultrasound had shown a free ocean of blood. He was drowning inside himself. "Pressure's dropping," Ida called from the head, voice tight but steady. One of the monitors squealed like a reprimanded toddler. The line dipped, then dove. "I see it," I muttered. "I always talk to my patients when they're out. I figure if there's a part of them that's listening, it deserves the truth. This will sting less than death, promise." Retractors, suction, a mess of clot sliding like jelly. I opened the pericardium and felt that awful loose thud of a heart that wants to quit. "Tear in the right atrium," I said. "Miller, 4-0 proline. And someone tell anesthesia I want." The monitor flatlined. The OR fell into a kind of practiced silence. It's not the silence of awe. It's the silence of people who know exactly what to do when the worst thing happens. "Starting compressions," Ida said, already moving. The anesthesiologist, Patel, muttered an apology to the ventilator, like it would matter to the family later. I slipped 2 fingers under the heart, found the slit where it shouldn't be, and thought, "You slippery bastard." "Not tonight." "Time of arrest?" I asked. 2:59, Ida replied. I sutured in the dream-quick way my body knows and my mind only chases. Needle. Bite, tie, slide, pull. Blood glossing my gloves like a second skin. The heart stuttered beneath my hand, and then went quiet, heavy as a stone in wet cloth. 42 seconds stretched out like a hallway with no doors. And then the floor vibrated. It was subtle, like the rumble of a subway train that shouldn't be there because we don't have one. A bass note pressed up from the concrete slab under our grippy shoes and sat in my bones. The overheads flickered, not the erratic chatter of failing bulbs, but in a single synchronized blink that made our shadows jump on the walls. The flatline hiccuped. "Hold," I said, though no one had moved. I felt it first, the heart under my fingers giving a dogged push, then another, like a swimmer surfacing through dark water. The tear I was closing seemed to cinch more easily than it had any right to. The skin at the edge, raw and frayed, looked not raw. The suture bit cleaner. The bleeding slowed, as if it was remembering how to behave. "And rhythm?" I asked without looking up. "Coming back," Ada said, awe leaking into her professionalism. "Elise, what did you do?" "I am very, very scary," I said. Dry, and tied the knot. We didn't question it out loud, not in the moment. We took the gift like thieves and moved. Patel adjusted meds. Miller kept pace like a shadow. I closed and closed, layers as neat as book pages, until the field looked less like a storm and more like aftermath. By the time we were wheeling him to the elevator for ICU, the monitor was almost smug, green peaks marching across the black. "Write that one up for your highlight reel," Miller said, his grin papering over the tremor in his hand. "I'll put it between the time a child sneezed into my eye and when a senator tried to tip me with a fruit basket," I said. "Aida, page radiology to be ready." She peeled off her gloves. "I felt something," she said under her breath, as if admitting a superstition. "Did you? Like a hum?" "I felt a lot of things," I said, including the urge to scream at gravity. I hit the call button with my wrist. "Let's just thank the gods of modern medicine." Which gods are those? Miller asked. The ones that pay for new monitors, I said. And the elevator doors closed. Paperwork is the purgatory between miracles. The residents always pretend they like it because it makes them feel responsible. I like it because it lets me reassert that reality is a thing you can pin down with words and numbers. At 3:27 a.m., I sat in the dim alcove off the OR, typing the story that would make sense of what didn't. Mechanism of injury, estimated blood loss, interventions, time of arrest, return of spontaneous circulation at... I stopped. The cursor blinked like a pulse I couldn't count on. I could swear my sutures had met a wound that was already trying to be smaller. I could swear the floor had vibrated in a way that felt like a response. But I'm not a poet. I'm a trauma surgeon. We file reality into codes. I deleted unexplained. I replaced it with responsive to intervention. The system rejected my note. Cute, I said to the screen. It's too early for mutual gaslighting. Ida stuck her head in. ICU got him, she said. Vitals holding. And radiology wants to name a coffee after you. I'll settle for them not naming a new wing after the lawsuit we dodge, I said. I hit save again. The little spinning icon twirled like a ballerina. Then the file winked out. Did you just, Ida started, lose an entire chart? No. Because that would imply our servers are connected to a toaster built in 1993. I tried again. The file directory refused to show the case. Maybe the server died and came back, she offered, deadpan. I snorted. Miracles are a finite resource. If the IT department is getting them, we're doomed. Her smile faded. Jokes aside, that was weird. The hum. The lights. Electrical anomaly, I said. It felt like a lie my mouth could live with. Put in a facilities ticket. Use the phrase pose hazard to life and limb, so they respond before the heat death of the universe. She nodded and left. Footfalls soft on the linoleum. The alcove was quiet again, the kind of quiet that holds its breath. I rubbed my sternum where the vibration had nested, like a cat that had decided my bones were a good bed. I opened a fresh document, because I am nothing if not stubborn. I wrote the note again, cleaner this time, as if tidier sentences could discipline the night. I hit save and watched the file settle into its place with all the others. My shoulders dropped. The overheads flickered. The hum came again, faint as a remembered song. The file directory refreshed itself of its own accord and, like a magic trick, done by someone who doesn't like applause, my note vanished a second time. Maybe the servers decided to resurrect, I said to no one. My laugh sounded too sharp. It made the alcove feel smaller. I pulled up the feeds from the security cameras on a separate monitor because, sometimes, I like to confirm that the building I work in is still where I left it. 4 squares, the OR hallway, the scrub room, the loading bay, and... The bottom right pane read L-3 access corridor. We don't have a level -3. We have -2, which is the mechanical systems, a place with pipes, the size of elephants and valves that scream when you turn them. I know every corner of this hospital the way a barista knows their espresso machine. There is no -3. The pane showed a hallway that could have been any old service corridor. Ugly concrete and ugly lighting. The timestamp in the corner marched toward 3:15 with bureaucratic relentlessness. At 3:14:58, the feed juddered like a film reel slipping. At 3:15, it cut to black. The other feeds kept rolling, greenish footage of emptiness, my alcove reflected in miniature. The bottom right stayed dark. After a full minute, it popped back on, as if nothing had happened. The timestamp was 1 minute ahead, polite enough not to pretend. I checked the archive. The gap at exactly 3:15 was there last night. And the night before, the software logged it as scheduled maintenance outage, which would have been adorable if anyone had told me we scheduled ghosts. Something cold threaded my spine and settled behind my heart. I am not prone to superstition. My hands have been inside too many chests for me to believe in a soul that leaves cleanly or a fate that bothers to plan. But the body learns patterns fast. 42 seconds. A hum from below. A tear that closed like it wanted to be smaller. A camera that politely looks away at exactly the same time every night. I stood, because sitting felt like agreeing to be reasonable. I shut down the monitor, because watching the feed would turn me into a person who stares at static and hears prophecies in it. I washed my hands again, though I hadn't touched anything, because ritual is a way to say, you're still you. Electrical anomaly, I repeated, for the part of me that was listening like a patient under anesthesia. Scheduled maintenance. Maybe raccoons learned IT. The floor hummed again. Just once, like someone, somewhere under my feet, had answered. The next night the hospital hummed like it always did. Restless, fluorescent, half asleep and half awake. Only, I wasn't sleeping either. The patient from the night before was alive. Alive and sitting upright in ICU, talking, eating, arguing about whether the crash had totaled his car. By every metric, he should have been dead. The floor hum was still in my bones. I pulled the building schematics up on my tablet while eating vending machine pretzels at 1 a.m. There was level -1, maintenance, level -2, mechanical. Below that, nothing. A clean white gap, as if the architects had collectively decided reality ended at the boiler room. Except it didn't. Because I'd seen the camera feed labeled L-3 access corridor. And because, 5 minutes ago, I saw a maintenance tech with a yellow badge, one I didn't recognize, take the service elevator down past -2. No one should be able to do that. I grabbed my ID, a pen light, and the small emergency flashlight from the trauma cart. Logic whispered that this was how people in horror movies died. Logic also whispered that those people weren't surgeons with malpractice insurance and a mean right hook. The elevator doors sighed open on level -2. The smell hit first, damp concrete, ozone, a trace of iodine. The pipes along the ceiling rattled like bones in a drum. My flashlight sliced a thin path through the dark. There, behind a wall of old cabinets and broken gurneys, was a service hatch. The paint was newer, almost recent, and someone had painted over the warning stencil. I brushed it clean with my sleeve. Authorized personnel only, 1943. Great, I muttered. Because when I think cutting-edge medical facility, I definitely think World War II. The hatch lock blinked red at my badge. Denied. But when I held the card longer, 3 seconds, 4, it blinked green. The air that came out was colder, older. I stepped in. The corridor sloped downward, lined with rusting conduit and signs in obsolete typeface. Surgical Unit C, Quarantine Sector. My shoes left faint echoes. Somewhere, water dripped with the patience of centuries. My flashlight beam landed on a set of doors, steel, with peeling paint and a faded insignia that made my stomach tighten. A caduceus. Except the snakes had claws. The moment I touched it, something low and resonant moved through the air. Like the building had exhaled. I froze. Then a voice came out of the dark. Low and perfectly calm. Don't come down here. The beam shook slightly in my hand. Excuse me? You shouldn't be here. The voice was close, but the acoustics made it sound like it came from everywhere. I squared my shoulders. That's the problem with shouldn'ts. I'm not very good at them. You won't find what you're looking for. I took another step. My flashlight caught only dust motes, metal, an empty gurney. I'm not looking for anything. I'm confirming that this place shouldn't exist. which, congratulations, it doesn't. Silence stretched. A living thing. Then, softly, the voice. You'll regret it. I smirked, even though my pulse was climbing. Too late. I stopped listening to patience and conscience around residency. Something shifted ahead, not movement exactly. More like density. My flashlight flickered once, twice, and steadied. In the pool of light, shadows stacked wrong against the far wall. And then, eyes, red, muted, not glowing but alive, watching. They didn't blink. They weren't human, and yet, there was no threat in them. Only fatigue. I tightened my grip on the flashlight. If this is maintenance, they really need better uniforms. No answer. Only the sound of air moving through lungs that shouldn't need to breathe. Fine, I said, half to the dark, half to my own stupidity. Enjoy your rent-free crypt. I turned, but my heel caught on something small and metallic. The sound of it skittering across the floor echoed too loud in the narrow space. A scalpel. I crouched, picked it up. The handle was engraved. Worn, but readable. KV, the letters were shallow, precise, done by someone who'd cared about detail. When I looked up again, the flashlight flickered hard enough to strobe. For one heartbeat of light, the darkness in front of me condensed into form. A man's silhouette, lean and tall, his skin marked by what looked like burns. The red eyes were still there, and now they narrowed like he was weighing whether to speak. Then, the light steadied. The hallway was empty. The hum under my feet whispered again, like a heartbeat under concrete. I pocketed the scalpel. Sure, I said aloud, because talking to yourself is only a problem if you answer back. Not creepy at all. But as I turned toward the elevator, the words on the wall caught the edge of my beam again. Project Healer. Restricted access. And the temperature dropped another few degrees, like something was paying attention. The next night, I brought a better flashlight, a first aid kit, and the worst idea I'd had in years. The door to level -3 opened easier this time, like it had decided resistance was pointless. The air down there clung heavier, wet metal, old iodine, a hint of ozone that made my teeth ache. I followed the corridor where I'd found the scalpel, until the wall bent into a low-ceilinged room. The beam caught a cluster of broken medical equipment, an exam table, a row of dusty shelves, the carcass of an EKG monitor. And in the middle of it all, a single lamp sat on a workbench, running on a portable battery. He was there. Not a hallucination, not a flicker, sitting on the edge of the table like he belonged there. Under the warm pulse of the lamp, the man, no, the thing, looked almost human. His skin had the faint shimmer of scar tissue, the kind that never really healed. His eyes, though, I'd seen blood, rubies, laser warnings, but this was different. His eyes were alive in a way that made mine feel secondhand. I was wondering when you'd come back, he said. His voice was low and unhurried, as if he'd been waiting for years. I'm a doctor, I said. Curiosity is an occupational hazard. Doctors don't usually come this far down. They also don't lose patience to miracles. I kept the flashlight steady on him. What are you? He smiled faintly, like I'd asked the wrong question. Names first. You already know mine. I know 2 letters. I pulled the scalpel from my pocket. KV? He tilted his head, amused. Kaen. You can call me that. It's easier than monster, though people tend to default to that one. Kaen. I tried it out. It fit his voice. Soft consonant. Dangerous vowel. You live under a hospital. I survive under it. He shifted his weight, and I saw the lines of muscle under the torn shirt. Human anatomy, but not quite. This place remembers what it was built for. Which is? War. That landed like a cold needle. I glanced around. The concrete walls, the surgical relics. You're telling me this was part of some wartime project? I'm telling you it still is. He turned his palm upward. The work never stopped, only the workers changed. Fine. What's your work? I heal. I laughed once, sharp. You what? Heal, he said simply. I take pain, redirect it, reuse it. That's not healing, I snapped. That's parasitic transference. He looked up at me, the corners of his mouth softening. And what do you call it when you cut a person open to save them? That's surgery. It's necessary. So is this. I hated that his calmness made me sound hysterical. You're saying you feed on suffering. I said I use it. He gestured to the corner where something small moved in the shadows. Would you like a demonstration? My instincts said no. My career said observe. The creature scurried into the light. A rat, its back torn open, ribs visible. I froze halfway between disgust and pity. Kaen extended his hand. The air shifted, thicker, charged. His palm hovered an inch over the rat's body, and something invisible bridged the space between them. The rat's trembling eased. Flesh began to knit, slow and surreal, like film running backward. Its breathing steadied. Within seconds, the wound had closed, leaving a thin, pale scar. Then the smell hit. Burnt skin. Kane's hand smoked faintly. Angry welts traced his palm, blooming like roses made of fire. He didn't flinch. That's the exchange, he said quietly. Life for pain. One must go somewhere. I stared, trying to find the trick, the sleight of hand, the physics I could quantify. That's impossible. You're welcome to disprove it, he murmured. I stepped closer, against better judgment. The burns on his hand were spreading up the wrist, cracking open. Without thinking, I reached for the first aid kit and popped it open. He watched me in mild amusement as I tore a bandage free. You don't have to. Apparently I do. I wrapped his hand tight. The texture of his skin was warm, almost feverish. Not demonic, just alive. Too alive. You're not afraid? He asked. Oh, I am, I said. I'm just busier than my fear. He laughed, quiet, genuine. You're the first to speak to me without a gun or a prayer. I caught myself smiling back before I could stop it. I'm not religious. And my aim's terrible. He tilted his head. That explains the compassion. I don't call this compassion, I said, finishing the bandage. I call it professional neurosis. Kaen flexed his hand. The gauze darkened where the burns touched it. You think I lie. I think you believe what you're saying, I admitted. But people believe in homeopathy too. He regarded me in silence long enough that I heard the slow drip of water from somewhere behind us. Rationality is a luxury, he said finally. When you've carried centuries of pain, reason stops being a refuge. Something in his tone, no threat, just exhaustion, cut deeper than the words. For the first time since I started medical school, I had no diagnosis, no category. My flashlight began to dim. The battery was giving up. In the softer light, Kaen looked less monstrous, more humanly wrong. Like a painting someone had over-restored. He stood, and I realized how tall he was. At least 6 feet, lean, every movement deliberate. He looked down at the bandage on his hand, then back at me. You're the first one who didn't run, he said. I swallowed. I'm the first one stupid enough to come back. He smiled. That, too. The light flickered once more, and for a heartbeat I thought I saw the faintest shimmer around him, like heat haze, like pain given form. Then the lamp steadied, and he was just a man again. Almost. By morning, the world above ground was aggressively normal. The cafeteria hummed with caffeine and gossip. Plastic trays clattered, nurses laughed about patient charts, someone's playlist leaked tinny pop through a phone speaker. I sat at a corner table with a coffee that tasted like melted gauze and tried to convince myself that the night below hadn't happened. Except for the scalpel in my pocket and the faint scent of iodine that still clung to my scrubs, even though I'd changed twice. "Rowen," said a voice like gravel poured through honey. Dr. Miriam Holtz, deputy chief of surgery, bureaucratic deity, destroyer of careers, stood across from me with her arms crossed. Her white coat was too clean for someone who'd ever touched blood. "Morning," I said, because sarcasm was a reflex. "Do we start with the praise or the threats?" Her expression didn't change. "You filed an incident report last night. Equipment malfunction, power irregularities, and..." She glanced at her tablet. "Possible unauthorized sublevel under the mechanical floor." "Possible," I echoed. "You can remove the possible part. There's a whole damn bunker down there." "There isn't." I waited. "That's your rebuttal?" "Elise." Her tone softened just enough to sound like danger disguised as mentorship. "You've been working too many double shifts. The last thing this hospital needs is another ghost story circulating." "It's not a story." "Then it's a delusion," she said simply. "And I need you functional, not paranoid." My coffee went bitter in my mouth. "You think I imagined an entire floor?" "I think you went looking for something that isn't there." She set her tablet on the table, perfectly aligned with the edge. "And if you keep looking, you'll find unemployment instead." I almost laughed. "So that's the policy? Pretend the foundation of the hospital doesn't hum at 3 a.m.? Her jaw flexed. "That report is already deleted from the system. I suggest you delete the memory as well." She turned to leave. I called after her. "What was this building before the hospital, Dr. Holtz?" She paused for half a second too long. Then she said, "A warehouse," and walked away. Warehouse, my ass. By noon, I was in the residence lounge pretending to do charting when Ethan Vale dropped into the chair beside me like a golden retriever in human form. Messy hair, toothpaste commercial smile, eyes too curious for comfort. "Morning, hero," he said, pushing a cup toward me. "Double espresso, 2 sugars, 1 unsolicited friendship." "I don't drink sugar," I said. "Then it's a gift. You can throw it at someone later." He leaned in, voice low. "So, rumor mill says you had a bit of a meltdown last night. Something about a ghost floor?" I didn't look up. Rumor mill should focus on hand hygiene. He grinned wider. "Come on, Elise. You can tell me. I'm good with secrets. You're good at spreading them." His grin faltered for half a beat, then came back polished. "Touché. Still, if something weird's going on, I can help." "Why? You bored of orthopedics?" He shrugged, feigning casual. "Just looking out for a colleague. You've been tense lately." "I'm a trauma surgeon. My baseline is tense." He studied me a little too long, eyes flicking to the lanyard at my neck, the one with my access badge. "Well, if you need to talk, you know where to find me." "Under a pile of paperwork?" "Under your skin," he said lightly, and left before I could roll my eyes hard enough to detach a retina. That evening, as the sun bled out behind the skyline, I found Aida restocking the supply closet. She looked up, then around, and whispered, "You went below." I froze. "Below what?" "Don't play dumb." She glanced at the door to make sure it was closed. "You're not the first, Elise. People used to talk about a floor under -2 years ago, but every time someone went looking, they got reassigned or just gone." "Gone?" She nodded, voice low. "You're smart. Be careful. If there's something down there, it's older than the hospital and meaner than administration. I wanted to laugh, but my chest was too tight. Thanks for the bedtime story. I'm serious. Her gaze softened. You're different. You'll dig until you hit bone. Just don't let it be yours. At 11:42 p.m., I packed like I was prepping for surgery, flashlight, gloves, sterile gauze, suture kit, trauma shears, and my ID. This time, I didn't tell myself I was hallucinating. This time, I knew exactly where I was going. The elevator groaned as it descended past the numbered floors, past -2, into the silence beneath. The door slid open on darkness that wasn't empty. It was waiting. I followed the corridor to the room with the battery lamp. The faint metallic scent reached me first, sharp and unmistakable. Blood. Kaen stood by the exam table, his back to me. His torn shirt was soaked crimson, though the skin beneath looked unbroken. On the table lay a man, unconscious, pale, breathing shallowly, chest wrapped in bloody gauze. Kaen turned his head slightly, red eyes catching the light. "It's not mine," he said quietly. And somehow, I believed him. The air downstairs always smelled like rust and iodine, but tonight there was something new in it. Burnt flesh. The room glowed with the soft amber of a single desk lamp. Beyond its reach, shadows pooled like thick water, rippling when Kaen moved. The table beside him was a battlefield of bandages, scissors, and bloodied gauze. He was sitting on the edge of the metal bed again, shirt in tatters, hands raw and blistered. The man who could heal others couldn't seem to stop hurting himself. "You're supposed to be immortal or something," I said, stepping in. "This looks very mortal." His head lifted. The eyes found me instantly. Red, but dimmer than before, tired. "It's not the dying that hurts," he murmured. "It's the living afterward." I rolled up my sleeves. "You sound like a poet. Try less poetry and more antiseptic." He almost smiled. "Doctor's orders?" "Doctor's ego." I grabbed the first aid kit from the counter, motioning for him to hold still. "Show me." He obeyed, hands steady in the light. The burns were deep. Angry welts that crawled up to his forearms. Skin split where the heat had bitten too hard. I could see the faint shimmer of healing already beginning beneath the surface, but it was slow, uneven. "Who was it this time?" I asked, uncapping the ointment. "A man from the fire on 7th Street. 2 children, 1 wife." His voice carried no pride, only exhaustion. I took enough of the pain to keep them alive. "Your definition of triage is suicidal." I started cleaning the burns. Careful, but efficient. "You could have split it, redirected it." "There was no one to take it," he said quietly. "Except me." The ointment hissed against his skin, and his breath caught. Not a flinch, more like a suppressed growl. The muscles in his forearm jumped. "Sorry," I said automatically. "You don't have to be occupational reflex." I reached for the gauze. "I'm trained to apologize to pain." His lips curved faintly. "And I'm trained to devour it." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was thick, electric. The steady drip from a leaking pipe in the corner kept time with our breathing. When I wrapped the gauze around his wrist, he spoke again. Softer this time. "You could heal yourself," I said without looking up. "I could," he replied. Then, with a quiet amusement that made my pulse skip, "But I like when you touch me." I froze for half a second, half a heartbeat too long. My hands didn't stop moving, but they weren't as steady as before. "You sound like my post-op patients under anesthesia," I muttered. He tilted his head, watching me. "Do they make you blush, too?" I tightened the bandage deliberately. "Only the ones I sedate afterward." He laughed. Low, warm, unguarded. It startled me how human it sounded. "Does it always hurt this much?" I asked. Yes. His eyes found the ceiling, as though he was searching for patience up there. The pain is the language my body speaks. When I heal others, it speaks louder. So, every time you save someone, you burn for it. He nodded. Sometimes fire, sometimes frost. Sometimes it feels like drowning in every breath they took before dying. That's not healing, Kaen, I said quietly. That's penance. He looked at me then, really looked, like the words had touched something raw. Maybe they're the same thing. I didn't answer. I just kept working. The lamplight softened his features, catching the faint sheen of sweat on his neck, the fine tremor in his fingers. He was still bleeding in places that wouldn't close. Every instinct screamed to step back, to re-establish the wall between doctor and anomaly. But I didn't. Instead, I found myself slowing down. Not for efficiency, for care. Your hands, I said finally, tying off the last strip of gauze. Try not to use them for 24 hours. That will be difficult. Then, try harder. Or I'll start charging you per injury. I have nothing to pay with. Then you'll owe me. He gave a small, knowing smile. I already do. Something in my chest clenched. Fear, maybe. Or something much dumber. I busied myself gathering the tools, pretending not to notice that his eyes followed me, like a shadow that understood warmth. Behind me, the dripping water slowed. The hum that always lived beneath the walls of the hospital deepened, vibrating in my ribs. When I turned, Kaen was still sitting there, but different. For a second, just one, the light flickered and his skin darkened. Not color, but texture, like the surface of cooling lava. His features wavered between human and something older, carved from pain itself. But his gaze stayed the same, calm, aware, almost kind. Then the moment passed. The lamp steadied. The illusion, or whatever it was, vanished. See something you don't like? He asked, voice even. I swallowed. You really need better skincare. That earned another quiet laugh. And you need sleep, doctor. Yeah, I said, collecting my kit. That makes two of us. I headed toward the door, and behind me, the steady rhythm of the dripping pipe started again. I almost thought I heard him whisper something under his breath. Something like, "Thank you." But it could have just been the echo. Either way, I didn't look back. Because the strange truth was, I already wanted to. By Tuesday morning, the hospital felt different. Too clean. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't come from order, but from surveillance. Rumors spread faster than sepsis, about miraculous recoveries, patients who shouldn't be walking, and Rowen's Lazarus case. Everywhere I went, conversations stopped just a fraction too late. Even the walls seemed to be listening. In the conference room, a row of men in suits sat where surgeons usually argued about budgets. Their badges said Health Compliance Unit, but the military posture and the clipped haircuts said something else entirely. Dr. Holtz stood beside them, her expression polished to neutrality. "Routine inquiry?" she said, as if the word routine could disinfect paranoia. "A follow-up on last week's cases." One of the suits, Agent Cole, met my eyes and smiled the way predators do when they've already decided how the chase ends. I recognized him. The man from the crash, the patient who had died, and then didn't. He looked perfectly healthy now. A faint scar under his collar was the only proof he'd ever been broken. "Dr. Rowen," Cole said smoothly, "mind if we ask you a few questions?" I wanted to say no. I said, "Of course." He took a seat across from me, pen poised over a small recorder. "You performed several emergency procedures last week. Some of those patients recovered with, let's call it, statistically improbable outcomes." "Maybe I'm just good," I said. He smiled again, too slow. Maybe? Or maybe you had help. Miller snorted from across the table, trying to diffuse the tension. You're implying she's got a guardian angel on payroll? Cole didn't look away from me. Something like that. The hum under the table returned, faint but real, crawling through the metal legs into my skin. I kept my expression blank. No, I said. I don't take assistants. They talk too much. He pressed a little button on his recorder. We'll be reviewing your logs, Doctor. Don't delete anything. I'm not in the habit of deleting evidence, I said. Other people handle that for me. Holtz's jaw tightened, and the suits left. She didn't look at me until the door clicked shut. Elise, she said softly, like a friend. Stop talking. About what? Anything. Everything. You don't understand what's in play here. Then explain it. I can't. Then I'll find out myself. Her expression flickered. Fear, regret, something old. Then she said, You'll regret that, and walked out. In the hallway, Ethan Vale was waiting, leaning against the wall with 2 paper cups of coffee. His smile was too bright. Hey, he said. Tough crowd in there, huh? Did you eavesdrop, or are you moonlighting as emotional support? Both. He offered me a cup. Caffeine makes betrayal smoother. I took it anyway. You've been talking to them, I said flatly. He blinked, all mock innocence. Who? Don't insult me. A beat too long. Then the shrug. They asked questions. I answered. They had clearance, Elise. I couldn't refuse. Couldn't? Or wouldn't? He sighed. I'm trying to protect you. They're not here for gossip. They're hunting something. I know. He studied me. Wary now. Then why don't you look surprised? Because surprise requires ignorance, and mine had already burned out. I left before he could say more. Behind me, I heard the faint click of a pen, probably a recording device. That night, Kaen found me first. I'd stayed late under the pretense of charting, but the hum had started again, deep, insistent from the floor below. When I turned, he was already there, half shadow, half something else. They know, he said. I noticed. They'll come down here soon. If they do, I won't be able to hide. Then we'll keep them above. He looked at me sharply. You think you can contain them? No. But I can misdirect them. People see what they're told to see. He moved closer, eyes burning faintly in the low light. You would risk yourself for me? I forced a smile. You heal people for free. I'm just balancing the billing. Something like amusement ghosted across his face, but it didn't last. If they find me, they'll call it a quarantine breach. And they'll burn this place clean. Then we make sure they burn the wrong part. He hesitated, then said quietly, You're changing, Elise. Occupational hazard. When he disappeared back into the tunnels, I went to the archives. The files there were older than most of the staff, paper thick as skin. Typewritten labels faded to ghosts. I followed the catalog numbers down to a section marked Historical Projects, Closed. A drawer groaned open. Inside, a single folder, Project Healer, subject Kaen, Fee 13. The pages were crisp, even after decades. Words like bioregenerative prototype, pain conduction, and military application leapt out in sterile font. There were photographs, black and white shots of operating tables, restraints, electrodes wired into human muscle, and at the bottom, a note scrawled by hand. Subject exhibits empathy reaction. Terminate if attachment develops. I sat there a long time, the folder open on my lap, the hum vibrating faintly under my chair. So he wasn't born. He was built. A weapon that chose to heal instead. The hospital never sounded like this before. Sirens wailed from every floor. fire alarms flashing crimson through clouds of smoke. The intercom voice kept looping, tinny and emotionless. Attention all personnel. Evacuate immediately. Gas leak detected in sub-level mechanical storage. Gas leak. Sure. And I was the Queen of Denmark. I shoved through the chaos of the ER. Orderlies pushing gurneys, nurses shouting over alarms, the air thick with antiseptic and burnt plastic. My scrubs were streaked with sweat and ash. Keep the East Wing clear. I yelled to Ida, who was herding patients like a shepherd with a death wish. Don't use the elevators. They've cut power below ground. What's happening, Elise? She shouted back. This isn't a drill. No, I said grimly. It's a hunt. The smell of ozone reached me before the next explosion. Something deep in the building let out a muffled boom, shaking dust from the vents. The lights flickered. I knew that rhythm now. It wasn't electrical failure. It was Kaen. He was awake down there, and he was fighting. I grabbed a trauma bag and my access card. My lungs burned, but not from gas. Adrenaline. From fear that had nowhere to go. By the time I reached the stairwell, the lower doors were already sealed with yellow hazard tape and a magnetic lock blinking red. I pressed my badge. Nothing. Elise. I turned. Ethan Vale, golden boy of orthopedics, appeared through the haze, coughing. Dramatically, but looking way too clean for someone caught in a disaster. Don't go down there, he said, stepping closer. They're saying the leak started below. You'll get yourself killed. Funny, I said. You sound less worried about me, and more about your friends in suits. He stiffened. You don't know what you're talking about. I do now. His eyes flicked to the corner. Tiny black device on his collar, blinking once. Recording. Still playing messenger, Ethan? I asked softly. Make sure you spell my name right in the report. Before he could answer, the stairwell door below blew open from the inside. A rush of wind hit us, cold and wet. The alarm stuttered, lights flashing like panic attacks. And then he stepped out of the smoke. Kaen, not human enough to pass anymore, shirt burned through at the shoulder, eyes glowing like coals behind glass. His movements were fast, silent, predatory. The air bent slightly around him, as if even oxygen remembered what he was. Behind him, two men in tactical armor sprawled unconscious. Their rifles lay twisted on the floor, metal warped from heat. Kaen saw me and stopped. For a second, the world narrowed to that. His gaze, mine, the hiss of gas leaking somewhere nearby. Elise, he said, voice steady. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you, I shot back. You're setting off every alarm in the building. They came for me. I noticed. I took a step closer, lowering my voice. Don't kill them. I didn't, he said simply. They'll wake up. He swayed slightly, and that scared me more than the smoke. You're hurt. He started, but the next explosion swallowed the rest of his words. Glass rained down from the ceiling. Something hit the wall beside me and shattered. A shard sliced through my shoulder, hot and bright, and I went down hard. Pain flared white. Blood soaked the fabric instantly. Kaen moved before I could blink. In 2 strides, he was beside me, kneeling, his burned hand pressing lightly over the wound. Don't, I hissed. You're in no shape. The words died in my throat. The air between us shifted, thick with that impossible vibration. The pain drained out of my shoulder like someone had flipped a switch. The torn skin sealed beneath his palm, leaving only warmth. But the same heat scorched him. His face tightened, jaw clenching, the burns on his arm deepening like fresh fire. You're too fragile for this world, he said quietly. I met his eyes. Then, fix it. He blinked once, surprised, almost smiling, and stood, pulling me up with him. We both turned as footsteps thundered at the end of the hall. Agents in dark gear, weapons drawn. Behind them, Ethan pointing toward us. Sub-level access is through that corridor. He yelled. The betrayal should have hurt. It didn't. Maybe Kaen had taken that too. Kane's voice dropped to a growl. Go back upstairs. Not a chance. He didn't argue. He moved. Fast. A blur of motion that the human brain wasn't designed to track. The nearest agent went flying into a wall. Another's rifle was ripped clean from his hands and bent in half. Kaen disarmed, disoriented, but didn't kill. Every movement was controlled, surgical, almost compassionate in its violence. Bullets sparked off the tiles, ricocheting uselessly. The air shimmered with heat. Somewhere, alarms turned into a continuous shriek, a mechanical scream of panic. Kaen! I shouted. We have to go. He turned toward me, chest heaving. For a heartbeat, his face looked tired. Not monstrous. Just done. Then the sprinkler system burst overhead, flooding the hall in a rain of cold water and smoke. The agents regrouped behind their shields, advancing. Kaen grabbed my wrist. This way. He led me down a service corridor, deeper into the belly of the building. The hum beneath the floors returned, vibrating like a heartbeat. My shoes slipped on the wet tiles. His grip didn't loosen. Behind us, voices shouted. Gunfire echoed. Ahead, a maintenance door glowed faint green under emergency light. Kaen slammed his hand against the lock. Metal hissed, half melted, and gave way. We stumbled through into the tunnel. The moment the door shut, the world went dim. Only the pulse of emergency lamps lit the path, painting everything in red. I could still hear the chaos above us. Sirens, shouts, the sound of my life collapsing in real time. Kaen turned to me, his hand still bleeding through the bandage I'd wrapped days ago. They'll seal every exit. You can still leave. I'm not leaving you, I said. He stared at me like he didn't understand the sentence. You don't know what that means. Maybe not, I said. But I'm still saying it. For a long second, the only sound was the dripping water and the faint hum of the generators below. Then he nodded, almost imperceptibly. Then we go down, he said. The lights flickered once, twice, then died completely. Darkness swallowed us whole. The tunnels under the hospital were never meant for people like us. They were half-flooded maintenance corridors, relics of a war no one wanted to remember. Concrete veins pulsing under a dying body. Water dripped from corroded pipes. The flicker of emergency lights turned everything into slow flashes of red and white, like the world couldn't decide if it was bleeding or trying to wake up. We ran through it anyway. Above us, sirens howled like an angry god. I could still hear the faint crack of gunfire, the barked orders, the chaos swallowing what was left of my life upstairs. The smell of gas and smoke bled through the vents. Kaen was ahead, moving fast but limping now, the soaked fabric of his shirt clinging to his back. Even weakened, he was too graceful for something that shouldn't exist. "Keep up!" he called over his shoulder. "Maybe if your labyrinth didn't have the humidity of hell," I shot back, trying to keep pace. My lungs burned. The cut on my shoulder, healed hours ago, ached again. Ghost pain, maybe psychosomatic. He glanced at me, half smile ghosting his mouth. "Complaining means you're alive." "Debatable," I muttered, stepping through ankle-deep water. We reached a fork. One path collapsed, the other sloping deeper. Kaen hesitated, head tilting slightly as though he could hear something I couldn't. Then he took my wrist and pulled me right. The contact startled me. Not rough, just grounding. His skin was warm despite the cold air. They'll flood these levels next, he said. Gas leak, containment breach, it's all the same lie. They'll bury what they don't understand. Guess we're the infection now? He looked back at me. No. I am. You're terrible at self-esteem. The next corridor was narrower, forcing us close. Our footsteps echoed over the low mechanical hum, rising from the depths. The emergency lamps buzzed and popped, one by one, until only the weak glow of my flashlight cut through the dark. Kaen stopped abruptly. Elise. I almost crashed into him. What? He turned toward me, expression unreadable. If they find you, they'll question you. Tear through your mind, your files, your body. You'd never recover. Yeah, I've worked in medicine long enough to know what that feels like. He didn't laugh. I can erase it, he said quietly. The memory. Of me. Of this. You'd be safe, forgetting me. My heart misfired once. Hard. You'd... what? It's easier that way. You walk away clean. No pain, no guilt, no record. I stared at him, at the calm way he said it, like he was offering anesthesia before amputation. You'd just take it? His gaze held mine. You wouldn't even know you'd lost something. I took a step closer until the light hit his face. The exhaustion, the burns. The quiet sadness etched into the lines that didn't belong to a monster. Try it, I said softly, and I'll give you a scar that won't heal. He blinked. Then, finally, smiled. Not the polite kind. The real kind, sharp at the edges, alive. You're the only patient, he murmured, who threatens her healer. You're the only healer dumb enough to need threatening. He chuckled, low and warm, and for one ridiculous moment, between the leaking pipes and the sound of the world ending above us, it felt almost normal. Two people talking in a hallway, teasing each other about survival. The ceiling groaned overhead, sending a rain of concrete dust between us. Kaen glanced up, then at me. We can't outrun this. They'll seal the exits within minutes. Then we stop giving them something to chase. He frowned. Meaning? I set down my flashlight, breathing hard. If they think I'm dead, they'll stop looking for both of us. He shook his head. No. Yes. Elise. It's the only play that works. I stepped closer, cutting off his protest. You disappear underground. I vanish topside. They'll write us both off as collateral damage. He looked at me as if the words physically hurt him. You don't understand what you're asking. Of course I do, I said. You think you're the only one who knows what sacrifice feels like? The sirens above deepened, turning into a single low alarm, the kind that meant final lockdown. Somewhere far behind us, a heavy door slammed shut. Kane's eyes flickered, red in the dark. You'd lose everything, I smiled bitterly. Already did. He didn't move for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached out, fingers brushing the side of my neck. Not a caress, but a question. You really want this? Yes. He nodded once, resigned. Then close your eyes. I did. The air changed. The hum that had followed me for nights now swelled, resonating through the concrete, through the marrow of my bones. For a heartbeat, I thought he was actually doing it, that he'd take everything, even me. But instead, he stopped. His hand fell away. I can't, he whispered. You chose this. I won't take that. My eyes opened. His expression was unreadable, caught between relief and despair. Good, I said, my voice shaking. Then help me make it real. By the time we reached the next junction, the tunnel was half submerged. He waded ahead, steadying me when I slipped. When the water rose to my knees, he stopped again, turning toward me in the flickering light. When this is over, he said, they'll think you're gone. Let them, his jaw tightened. I'll make sure they believe it. And then? He hesitated. Then I stay below. Until the world forgets me again. I met his eyes, the red reflections shimmering in the dark water. Not everyone forgets you, Kaen. He looked like he wanted to argue, but didn't. Above us, the alarms finally began to fade, distant, muffled. The hospital was sealing itself off, burying its ghosts. He reached for my hand, a quiet promise in the gesture. Ready? I squeezed back. Let's make it convincing. And together, we disappeared into the dark. The city forgot me fast. Official reports listed Dr. Elise Rowen, presumed dead, one of several casualties during the gas leak tragedy at St. Alder Hospital. A photo of me, blurry, overexposed, circulated for a few days on local news before fading into the static of new disasters. And maybe that was for the best, because a few miles beyond the city's glow, in a half-collapsed warehouse that smelled of oil and rain, a different kind of hospital was breathing again. The first thing you'd notice if you stepped inside wasn't the rusted beams or the patched windows. It was the smell. Coffee, iodine, and metal. My new holy trinity. We'd cleared out a section of the floor and lined it with old operating tables scavenged from closed clinics. Kaen was crouched over a generator in the corner, sleeves rolled up, his hair a little too long now. Sparks flared briefly as he tightened a bolt. "You're going to electrocute yourself one of these days," I said, setting down a tray of sterilized instruments. He didn't look up. I heal fast. Not fast enough for my patients. That's your bedside manner. Correction, I said. That's my warehouse-side manner. A small laugh ghosted between us, soft, unhurried. Ida stepped in from the front door, her coat dripping rain onto the cracked floor. "You two bicker like an old married couple," she said, pulling off her gloves. "Good news, the city's gossip train has moved on." "No one's looking for you anymore, Elise." "Tragic," I said. "I was hoping for a memorial wing." "Settle for a decent coffee machine," she said, heading to the tiny makeshift counter. "We've got 2 new patients tonight, factory workers. One's got a crushed hand, the other's too drunk to feel his ribs cracking." Kaen glanced up from his repairs. "Bring them in through the side. I'll prep the heat lamps." "You're not supposed to help," I reminded him. "I'm not supposed to exist." He said it casually, but the words lingered. Ida pretended not to hear and went to fetch the patients. I turned to Kaen. "You shouldn't be doing heavy lifting. Your arm's still—" He raised an eyebrow. "I'm not human, remember?" "Right," I said. "So the rules of ergonomics don't apply." He smiled faintly. "You sound almost like yourself again." "Almost," I agreed. The generator coughed, then hummed to life, flooding the clinic with warm light. The shadows retreated to the corners. For the first time in weeks, the air didn't smell like hiding. It smelled like work. I slipped on my gloves and moved to the table as Kaen checked the overhead light, adjusting its angle. His movements were quieter now, more measured, like he was learning how to exist without the hum of pain running through him. When I caught him watching me, he said, "We're still under the hospital." I paused, needle in hand. "What?" He nodded toward the ceiling, metaphorically. "We're still beneath everything, still between the living and the dying." I smiled. "Just freer." He tilted his head. "You call this freedom? I call it ours." That seemed to satisfy him. Ada returned, guiding in the 2 men. "Your next miracles," she announced. I sighed. "We're open. No license, no conscience. But the coffee's great." One of the workers laughed weakly. "You sound like an angel." I almost told him the truth, that angels don't work for free and demons make better assistants. but Kaen shot me a warning glance. So I just said, "Close enough." Hours later, after the patients were stable and Ida had gone home, I sat, alone under the lamp, writing notes that would never enter any system. The quiet was deep enough to hear the rain tapping the roof. Kaen moved behind me, adjusting a shelf, humming under his breath, some melody too old for me to recognize. The light caught him as he turned, reflecting in his eyes like small embers. I looked up from my chart. "You know," I said softly, "for a ghost story, this one ended better than I expected." He smiled, that quiet kind of smile that warmed more than it should. For the first time in a long while, I realized we weren't hiding anymore. We were healing. And under that warm, flickering light, for the first time since the siren stopped, I let myself breathe. Rain drummed against the corrugated roof, steady as a heartbeat. The clock above the old supply cabinet read 2:14 a.m. The clinic slept in soft shadows, monitors humming, a single lamp glowing over the main table. We'd been quiet for hours, the kind of quiet that means nothing's gone wrong. Yet, then came the knock. Ida opened the door halfway, her expression unreadable. "Walk in," she said. "Bad shape? No ID?" 2 men carried him inside, soaked in rain and blood. I froze when the lamplight hit his face. Agent Cole, the man who'd smiled across the interrogation table months ago, the man who'd hunted Kaen through my hospital, who'd called us infection. Now he was the one dying. They laid him on the table, and the metallic tang of blood filled the room. I pulled on gloves automatically. Muscle memory didn't care about grudges. Kaen stood near the back, motionless, his eyes dark and still. "Gunshot wound," I said. "Left abdomen. We'll need to stabilize before extraction." Kane's gaze met mine, silent question written in red. "This one? After everything?" I knew what he was thinking. Maybe what I was supposed to be thinking, too. But my hands didn't pause. They never do. When I spoke, my voice was steady. "We don't choose who deserves to be saved," I said, not looking away from the wound. "We just save." For a long moment, he didn't move. Then Kaen stepped forward, slow and deliberate, and set his hand near the wound. His skin glowed faintly, light bleeding into the dark. Cole gasped once and went still, but alive. When it was over, Kaen exhaled, his shoulders easing. The burns along his arm deepened, smoke rising faintly from the skin. He turned to me, voice low. "Then maybe we're not monsters after all." "Maybe," I said, and peeled off my gloves. "But we make damn good ghosts." Outside, the rain thickened, the city's distant lights smearing across puddles in streaks of red and gold. The neon sign we'd never bothered to fix flickered in the window. Open 24 hours. Kaen sat on the edge of the table, his reflection catching in the glass. I met his eyes. The world above could keep its daylight and its rules. Down here, in the hum of old machines and coffee steam, a surgeon and a demon worked the night shift. On the same side of the light.